Okay, so here's our albumin. Again, I'm going to make sure that that edge is kind of curled back a little bit. And then we're going to be kind of curling it a little bit so we can lay the center part down first into the albumin. And then as soon as it touches the surface, I'm going to quickly release both sides so that it can drop down into the albumin. Okay. Then once it lays down in there, gently with your finger, press it down so that it touches the surface. Again, do this gently as to not submerge it. We don't want to then push it down so far that the albumin then comes up and over the back. We're going to do everything that we can to avoid getting into the albumin on the back of the paper. You'll notice it's laying fairly flat. There's a little bit of a curl to it from where I've kind of pressed it down. Once it's gotten in there, we need to set our timer to 3 minutes. And that will give it 3 minutes to then absorb the albumin. While we're waiting for that to happen, I'm going to get the next piece of paper back underneath that piece of paper towel so that there's time for that to start to absorb so that we can kind of keep a system and momentum going as we're getting this prepared. And so that's our 3 minutes. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and lift the piece of paper out of the albumin. Since one corner is kind of lifting up a little bit more than the others, I'm going to go ahead and lift it out from that corner. Notice I've put on gloves just so that I don't get my hands in the albumin, although there's nothing really of great harm in there, but still, just as a matter of practice, it's best to still wear gloves. So I'll just gently grab it by one corner and then ease it out of the albumin. And there's our piece of paper. And I'm just letting it drip down into one side. Don't forget, on the back, on one of these sides, we've got the T. That's going to be the top for the way that we hang it. And so in a minute, we're just going to move it over to the drying rack and go ahead and hang that up. So here we are at the drying rack. And again, we're going to look at the back of our piece of paper, find the T. That's going to be the top side for the first coating. And then what we need to do is just take one of our push pins, place that through one of the holes that we've already punched. So you can see, let's get that through that hole that we've already punched. And then hang it up onto our drying rack. And so usually what I do is just kind of hold on to the back with my fingers and push the pin through. And then with the other hand, grab another pin, line it up with the hole, and then place it in on the opposite side. And then do the same things to the bottom corners as well. Now the reason we're going to do a double coat is that as gravity starts to pull down the albumin, we're going to collect more towards the bottom. And so what we want to do is then rotate it and allow it to drip in the opposite direction. That'll help even out the coating. The other thing is we're going to be starting to get some albumin to collect here at the bottom, and so we're going to want to also soak up some of that extra albumin so that we don't have a really thick edge at the bottom, and it takes a lot longer to dry. So as it starts to drip down, we're going to use just a plain piece of paper towel, and we're going to just run it along this bottom edge, and that'll help soak up some of the extra albumin that's collecting at the bottom. So you can kind of see that some of that is coming off of there. We'll just absorb that up. And that'll just help it also to dry a little bit more quickly and to kind of even out that bottom edge. Also, while we're at this point, if we notice any little bubbles, just simply take one of our push pins and go along the edge of the surface without touching the surface and try to pop those bubbles. If they won't pop, the other option would be to slowly kind of move them off to the side as well. If we leave the bubbles on there, it's going to give us kind of an uneven surface, and they will dry and stay there. So whatever we can do to try to remove any of those little blemishes or bubbles, take the time and get those out of there. And typically I'll do this while the other albumin is soaking. Okay, so here's our next piece of paper. Again, we're just going to lay it in softly. As soon as it touches the surface, we're going to go ahead and release, allow it to drop on there. Gently press down the edges so we get a nice even surface, and then set our timer for 3 minutes and allow that to float. While it's floating, prepare the next sheet of paper and double check on any of the other papers that are already in the drying rack. Dab the bottom edge so that it doesn't have too much albumin sitting there. Check for bubbles and get ready for the next one. And just keep them going. Typically, I'll coat 4 to 8 sheets of paper at a time so that I have some to work with for the next few days. So here's our last sheet of paper. Again, double check to make sure that you have the T so that it's facing at the top. And then we'll go ahead and hang that up on the drying rack. And then once these are all done drying, which will take about 30 minutes, what we need to do is then take them in and put them inside of the hot mount press. That'll help flatten them and also cure them in between the coats. If you neglect to do that, what will happen is the first coat of albumin will just kind of wash off. So it's really important that we cure it. If you don't have access to a drying mount press, then the other option is using alcohol and salt, but it really helps to flatten them, so if you do have that, that's really the best way to go. Okay, and again, once we get these hung up, we'll again check the bottom surface and soak up any of that extra albumin. So there we go. And then we'll just run this along the bottom edge and take off some of that extra albumin. And we'll double check and make sure we don't have any air bubbles and other things on the surface that we want to get rid of. So there we go. Those are our 4 sheets. We'll just give those a little bit of time to dry and we'll go on to the next step. One of the ways to expedite the drying process is to use a hair dryer. With a lot of the other alternative processes, sometimes using a hair dryer maybe isn't the best idea. But with albumins, the hotter it is, the actual glossier it turns out. So if you want to use a hair dryer for part of the drying time, it could actually help. So just to help expedite things, I usually use it a little bit. It also kind of can help equalize the drying of the surface by putting the hair dryer both on the front and on the back. So we're just going to do a really quick hair dry. And always do it on low. And just gently take it along the edges, especially along the bottom edge, because that's where it's going to be kind of collecting. And just make sure you don't have it on so high that you're going to blow it off of the pins. But this will help evaporate some of the albumin and help speed it up a little bit. And then I'll usually just take it along from the back side and also make sure that it's not going to blow off. But a little bit can go a long way. So if you have the access to a hair dryer, it really can help speed up that process so that you can get on to the next steps, because albumin does take a long time. So where we can kind of save a little bit of time here and there, you may as well do.